welcome to Independent Green Party, Green TV. I'm Kerry Campbell, Independent Green Party.
Hi, I'm Brooklyn Kinley with the Independent Green Party. Independent Green Party, Green TV focus is Independent Green Party candidates for local, state, and federal office.
Green Party, Green TV reports on positive Green Party, Green New Deal, eco-jobs for the economy.
Green Party solar jobs, wind jobs, geothermal jobs.
Green Party insulation jobs, conservation jobs, weatherization jobs.
Green Party rail jobs, building walkable, bikeable, pedestrian, and rail-friendly communities.
Green Party, Green TV is about positive Green Party, Green New Deal solutions.
Independent Green Party local, state, federal, and presidential candidates offer positive eco-solutions. Eco-capitalism's prices must tell the environmental truth. A green industrial revolution means jobs, and we need to cut taxpayer subsidies to zero for fossil fuels, big oil, big auto.
Green Party Town Hall. We're bringing it to you in no small part because voters, many of you, keep expressing a desire for a third-party alternative. So with us here tonight, some of those voters, most of them undecided. And guess what? They've got questions. As always, the questions come mainly from the audience in these town halls. We've looked them over, of course, to make sure they don't overlap. I'm going to be asking a few myself as well. So what do you say? Let's get to it. Joining us right now is Green Party presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein. She is a trained physician, ran for president in 2012 on the Green Party ticket. Vice presidential candidate Ajamu Baraka is a longtime human rights activist, a grassroots organizer as well. Welcome to you both.
Good. Thank you very much.
All right, Doctor, let's start with the basics. The Green Party. Tell the audience tonight what matters about this party. What does it offer that is better than everything else out there?
So the unique thing about the Green Party is that we are the one national party that is not corrupted by corporate money, by lobbyist money, or by super PACs. So we have the unique ability to actually stand up for what it is that the American people want, what everyday people want. That is, we have a jobs emergency, and we call for an emergency jobs program that will actually solve the emergency of climate change that we are seeing in the floods and the fires and the heat waves across this country that are so painful to watch right now. This is what the future looks like if we don't stand up and start doing something about it. We're the one party that's actually calling for canceling student debt and bailing out a generation of young people like we bailed out the bankers on Wall Street. We can do that for this generation and unleash them to be the stimulus package of our dreams and make higher education free and health care as a human right and create a welcoming path to citizenship, end police violence, and a foreign policy that's based on international law, human rights, and economic justice, not on military and economic domination, which is blowing back at us so catastrophically. So in short, we're standing up for everyday people and an America and a future that works for all of us.
Now, Doctor, speak to yourself individually as a candidate. Why do you believe you represent a better choice than the other candidates?
You know, I'm a mother and a medical doctor. I'm in this really because I know there's no future for my kids unless there's a future for all kids. I'm not a professional politician. I don't need a job as a politician. I've never had a job as a politician. I've been a part of the social movements, really struggling for our health, for jobs, for an environment that's healthy for us instead of these epidemics of asthma that we have, the epidemic of diabetes tied into our food supply. I got into this really, as a medical doctor, looking at this tide of illnesses that we didn't used to have and feeling like it wasn't enough to just give people pills and push them back out to the things that are making us sick. So I got involved with our communities to help correct these problems at their basics. So now I'm practicing not clinical medicine, but political medicine, so we can heal our political system and start to actually fix these problems that are threatening not only life and limb, but our very existence on this planet.
Plenty of obvious symptoms. So let's talk about the man to your right, your choice of running mate Ajamu Baraka. Why was he your choice?
Because he is an inspirational and passionate advocate for justice and for human rights. And we are at a crisis moment in this country and even globally, a crisis of injustice, of racial injustice and economic injustice. We need a national conversation right now so that we can get past this moment of police violence and this economic violence, this mass incarceration system that has so devastated our communities. And Ajamu's background is all about these struggles for justice, and for us to bring this conversation from our different perspectives and our different backgrounds. This is exactly the conversation that America needs to have right now so we can heal and become one community and move forward based on our human rights and our human values.
So, Mr. Baraka, what is it that is motivating your interest in this election? What is your message to the voters?
My motivation is that this is a critical moment that we have an opportunity to do something really different. I mean, I joined this ticket because I believe in Jill Stein. I believe in this party. The Green Party is the only vehicle we have right now that can offer a real alternative. You know, people are not ready to accept the notion that we have to be held hostage to these two elite parties. People are willing to gamble with the possibility that we can really build something new and different. So I think in 2016, we have this kind of historic opportunity. As Dr. Stein said, you know, my whole life has been about building alternative power. It's about speaking truth to power. It's about understanding that it is the people themselves that have the possibility to transform their conditions and transform themselves. So that's my motivation too, after all these years, to step into this electoral process, to be subjected to the kinds of dirty politics involved in this, because I really believe that at this moment we have a real possibility of moving forward collectively in a new way.
All right, so the question then becomes, well, how do you do that? All right, this is a process. You get exposure. You do a lot of it online. We're giving you an opportunity here at CNN. We believe it's part of our duty to the process to represent all the different parties that are options. But that's not enough. The debate stage has a requirement, 15%. The media doesn't design it. As you well know, there's a committee that does it, that is staffed. They've come up with 15% of 5 national polls that they pick. You're nowhere near that. The Libertarian candidate is nowhere near that. Together, you're not even near. So you sued, it didn't work. What do you do to get the exposure you will need to be competitive?
So, you know, this is not going to get decided in a court of law. Excuse me. I think it will get decided in the court of public opinion. This is about we the people standing up. As Americans, we not only have a right to vote, we have a right to know who we can vote for. And the Commission on Presidential Debates is not just an ordinary public interest commission. It's a private corporation that is run, excuse me, of, by, and for the Democratic and Republican parties. The League of Women Voters quit the debates when the commission came forward, and they quit saying this is a fraud being committed on the American voters, because it allows these two parties to set a standard for admission that silences political opposition. We have a right to know who our choices are. There are 4 candidates who will be on the ballot, that is 4 candidates for president, who will be on the ballot for just about every voter in the country that have the numerical possibility to actually win the election, that represents a much greater diversity of choices than just Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. where one of them is a member of the billionaire club, but the other one has actually been quite an ally and an advocate for the billionaire club. So the American people deserve to hear from people who are not part of that economic elite and the political system that serves it. So I want to encourage people to go to Jill2016.com and sign up on our campaign to open up the debates, and hold on to your hat and stay tuned, because I don't think the American people are going to take this sitting down. There is too much at stake. We need real democracy.
Question about your opponents. One of the big markers in this process is when the main candidates wind up getting their first intel briefing. Donald Trump got his today. Hillary Clinton's going to get one very soon. Critics of Clinton have said, because of what happened with the email server, and I'm bringing it up because you've been very robust on this issue, they say she has shown an inability to deal with classified material. She should not get the briefing. Do you agree with that?
You know, I'm not. I have not been informed yet on exactly the nature of this briefing, but I will say she's under a lot of pressure right now. You know, and she's being very carefully scrutinized. Part of the problem, you know, with Hillary's abuse of the rules, she was sort of too big, you know, too big to jail on the rules, and she violated those rules with a sense of impunity. And she violated them for a purpose which she stated herself, that she wanted her private information private. Now, it turns out half of her emails she deleted as private. If someone is working for you and half of their emails on the job are for their private personal foundation, it really raises questions. So I do have serious questions about Hillary's judgment, her safeguarding of national security information, and above all, her trustworthiness in the job where she will have her finger on the button, given how she handled major decisions both around the war in Iraq, but then especially around the war in Libya, where she led the charge. So yes, I have serious concerns about Hillary. That's why I'm in this race to provide an alternative to people who don't like Donald Trump. You know, you have more alternatives out there than just Hillary Clinton.
Speaking of Mr. Trump, Mr. Baraka, he's shaking up his campaign. Why? Well, what the outward signs are that he's getting ready to double down on what he believes got him here in the first place. He's going to go right back at Hillary Clinton, forget the teleprompter, forget about messages and all these speeches. I'm going to get after her, and that's what I do best. Now, many people are concerned that that's going to make what seems very negative already like a scorched earth environment. Now, you're no stranger to heated rhetoric, but do you have a concern about what this election may descend into, which means not talking about any of these people, but really devolving into a conversation about who's the worst person?
Well, I am, because it has really harmed the possibility of real democracy here in this country. When you have someone like Donald Trump and what he represents, the kind of dark forces he has been appealing to, it's only going to result in a continued deterioration of the democratic practice and process here in this country. You know, we're going to have to deal with Donald Trump even after the election, win or lose, because he is appealing to a social base that is prepared to continue to embrace some of the darker side of humanity. His appeal to folks who embrace xenophobia, racism, his bigotry around religion. The unfortunate reality is that it has resonated with some elements of this society. So, you know, if he's committed to doing that, that's fine. We are going to have an alternative message. We're going to talk about what is best in this country, in this society. We're going to talk about our possibilities. We're going to talk about why we need to build a new kind of social justice movement here in this country, a new kind of democracy. So we confront the Donald Trumps with a positive message of hope and a positive message of real change here in this country.
Now, a follow-up on that. Green Party Town Hall, time now for questions from the audience. Our first is from Gloria So. She's a student at Columbia University. She did support Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primaries, but now she's undecided. She says she is leaning in favor of Hillary Clinton. So, Doctor, Mr. Baraka, here is your shot to win her over. Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Stein. My question today is, what would you like to say to win over Sanders supporters like me who are absolutely not voting for Trump but are feeling somewhat disillusioned by Clinton?
Great. So first, what I would say is thank you so much for having changed the political landscape forever. So big thank you to all of the Sanders supporters. And the political system will never be the same. And what I have to say is that you've learned really in real time why it is that you can't have a revolutionary campaign in a counter-revolutionary party. Bernie did everything right, and his supporters did everything right, but the playing field was really steeply and unfairly tilted against you, from superdelegates to Super Tuesdays to voting irregularities to the emails that showed how the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, was colluding behind closed doors with Hillary Clinton's campaign to smear Bernie Sanders in the press. And this was extremely unfair. And then Hillary now, has really moved to court Republicans, has sort of an official committee to bring Republicans over. She's appointed a centrist vice presidential candidate. They did not allow some of the Sanders spokespeople to have a role in the at the convention. Bernie himself was relegated to a very low-profile role. So what I'd say is all the work you did and the incredible passion and vision and blood, sweat, and tears that you put into that campaign, that lives on. And Bernie himself said, it's a movement, it's not a man. And it's clear Hillary does not represent what you were working for. Our campaign has been here from the start. Many people have looked to us from Bernie's campaign as Plan B, so that if they ran into trouble, they could continue building this revolutionary campaign, but now all the stronger for being inside of a revolutionary party that supports the work that you're doing and will continue to build it until we prevail.
Now, Mr. Baraka, the polls show about 7 in 10 Sanders supporters say they're going to go with Hillary Clinton, but they're varying degrees of strength. So they're going to do their research. They're going to see that on party platforms, the Green Party does line up with a lot of the things that Senator Sanders was fighting for. But when they do their research, I want to give you an opportunity to clear up some of the things you've said about Senator Sanders, because not all of it was flattering. The main idea you had was that Bernie Sanders should be seen as an ideological prop. And that there was an idea of nativism to his campaign, an idea of complementing white supremacy to his campaign. What did you mean by those statements for when the Sanders supporters come looking your way?
Well, what we had to do was to raise some issues that seemed to be at one point very troubling. Chris, I wanted to feel the burn. I really did. And so, as Dr. Stein said, I saw from the very beginning the real possibility for this campaign to really expand the scope of conversation here in this country, to introduce to the American people a term like democratic socialism, to really tap into this desire that people had for real change. But I was troubled by some other tendencies, and that is that we can't build a progressive or revolutionary process by just looking at the United States of America. That, you can't disconnect U.S. foreign policy from domestic policy. And so I was concerned by some of the comments around, allowing the Saudis to get their hands dirty. Because many of us who follow geopolitical events understand that not only were the Saudis' hands dirty, they were dripping with blood. And so my point was that Bernie needed to understand that the American people were ready for a real progressive candidate. You don't have to play into the hands of the Democrats. You don't have to embrace Barack Obama's drone program. You don't have to suggest that, or be silent about other foreign policy issues. So I wanted to see a real comprehensive, progressive campaign, and the people were ready for that. So, I
So
had
why
to
didn't
raise
you
some
say that
questions.
instead of hitting them over the head with being a tool of white supremacist ethical contradictions that reinforces racist cynicism? Why'd you have to hit him over the head with that, Senator Sanders, if you wanted to feel the burn? That's not trying to feel the burn.
Because I wanted him to deal. I wanted his supporters to deal with those contradictions. Like Dr. Stein said, this wasn't about the man; it was about the movement. We've got to disconnect personalities from movement building. You know, and we've got to, if we see contradictions, we have to engage in those conversations with our friends. This was a conversation among those of us on the left, progressive people. The Sanders supporters were pushing back, you know, when people were raising questions with the Sanders folks, they were saying, oh, you all are purists, you're dogmatists. And my comment in that article was, look, there are some serious questions being raised. I never wrote an entire article on the Sanders campaign, but I was pushing back saying, look, you can't just dismiss the critique. If we want to be serious about really building progressive power in this country, talking about our conversations among ourselves, we've got to deal with these contradictions. So, you know, if you only look at the U.S., if you only prop up life in the U.S., you are privileging life in the U.S., you're privileging white life when the Saudis and others are involved in killing black and brown people around the world.
We have a question that goes to America's reach around the world. Now let's bring in Alexander McCoy. He's a former Marine Corps sergeant. He's from Rhode Island, and he served in Saudi Arabia, Germany, and Honduras. He's now a student at Columbia University. He says he's leaning towards supporting Secretary Clinton. Interestingly, for you, Alexander, Mr. Baraka, I believe, is the only person who served active duty in the armed forces in the race right now. So what's your question, sir?
Dr. Stein, you said that you oppose the use of U.S. forces overseas. U.S. forces are currently engaged in airstrikes against ISIS and other military operations. My question is, do you consider ISIS to be a threat to the U.S. or to U.S. allies and partners in the Middle East? And if so, what would you do to defeat ISIS that the Obama administration is not currently doing?
So, you know, there are rules of engagement, international rules, that if you're going to attack another country, you need to be at imminent threat of being actually attacked by them. Clearly, that threshold has not been met. ISIS is not about to launch a major attack against our country. And we have a track record now of fighting terrorism, not only ISIS, but Al-Qaeda before it, the Taliban before that. And this track record is not looking so good. We have spent $6 trillion, according to a recent Harvard study, when you include the costs, the ongoing costs of health care for our wounded veterans who deserve the highest care possible. $6 trillion, which since 2001. We have killed 1 million people in Iraq alone, which is not winning us the hearts and minds in the Middle East. We have lost tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers that have been killed or severely wounded. And what do we have to show for this? Failed states, mass refugee migrations, and repeated terrorist threats that get worse with each cycle. So ISIS grew out of the catastrophe of Iraq. Al-Qaeda, in turn, grew out of Afghanistan. And in fact, in Afghanistan, it was the CIA and the Saudis together who created the first so-called jihadi movement with the Mujahideen in order to make trouble against the Soviet Union. So this has been a very ill-conceived plan that has been backfiring madly against us. So what we say is that we need a new kind of offensive in the Middle East, because bombing terrorism and shooting terrorism is not quelling terrorism. It's only fanning the flames of terrorism, the misery and the poverty that drive terrorism. We are calling for a new kind of offensive, a peace offensive in the Middle East that begins with a weapons embargo. And since we are supplying, the U.S. is supplying the majority of the weapons to actually all combatants, we and our allies are arming most of the fighting forces in the Middle East, we can initiate that weapons embargo. And we also call for a freeze on the funding of those countries who continue to support jihadi terrorist enterprises. Hillary Clinton herself said in a leaked State Department memo that in fact the Saudis are still the major funder of terrorist Sunni enterprises. So if we started it, we and our allies have the capacity to shut it down.
So
that's how we need to move forward.
So, Doctor, just to be clear, you said you call for a military spending cut of 50%. You want all foreign bases closed. There's no question that this is a complex problem. It's not just a military solution, but the military is almost always involved in different reckonings of a solution. Are you saying that there'd be no U.S. military presence anywhere else in the world and that would keep America safe?
So we now have somewhere between 700 or 800 or even more military bases around the world. Do you know how many military bases all other countries combined have? About 30. There's something really wrong with this picture. Do you know? Do you know how much of our budget actually goes to maintaining this bloated and dangerous military budget? 54% of our discretionary budget, which is about half of your income tax, is going to this failed, catastrophic policy of regime change.
But I'm just trying to be clear. Would you close all of them?
That would be our presumption. There may be certain bases for certain circumstances that need to remain open. But our presumption is to close the bases. And our presumption is also to shut down the weapon systems like the F-35 that will cost us almost $1.5 trillion before we're done. Or to shut down the new generation of nuclear weapons, which has no role whatsoever in military or on the planet. We need to be backing off and phasing out all nuclear weapons now, not moving forward with a new $1 trillion program for new nuclear weapons.
Mr. Baraka?
You know, Chris, there's an assumption in your question that we have to take a look at, and that is that that we're going to be able to respond in a military fashion to all of these various threats. See, one of the reasons why we have the ISIS threat today is because of the enormous incompetency of U.S. policy in the so-called Middle East over the last 16 years. Mm-hmm. You can't, talk about the ISIS threat and then not look at the kinds of policies that help to facilitate the growth of ISIS.
Be part of the positive solution. The Independent Green Party and Green Party recruits candidates for local, state, and federal offices across the U.S. Contact the Independent Green Party through their webpage at www.votejoinrun.us.
In Virginia, people can contact the Independent Green Party at 703-351-1235. Email the Independent Green Party State Chairman, Joe Otto, at usrepublic@aol.com. And check out the Independent Green's YouTube channel, or contact the Independent Green Party on the Independent Green Party Facebook page.
That's this edition of Independent Green Party Green TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brooklyn Kinlay, Independent Green Party.
I'm Kerry Campbell, Independent Green Party. See you again next time on Green Party Green TV.